Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God.
I'm Abby.
I'm Fletcher.
And I'm Jay.
Wait a minute. That didn't sound right. Let's try that again.
Okay, yeah.
I'm Abby.
I'm Fletcher.
And I'm Jay.
And today's story is about King Nebuchadnezzar.
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 I'm very grateful for Google autofill, so I'm just typing it to type it up the script, and I just type NEB, and then it autofills Nebuchadnezzar.
Nice.
I'm like, nice.
That's
I don't have
great.
to spell it each time. I couldn't even if I tried.
Yeah, it's not the easy. It's not like Adam.
Not like Abby.
Or
Easy.
Eve.
Or Eve. Or okay, anyways, that is not where we were going. How do we bring it back? Just like last week, we had to segue back into the question.
Nebuchadnezzar has a dream.
He does, and
He has a dream.
there's a statue involved in one of the stories that we're talking about today. And so if someone were to build a statue to represent you using three objects, what would they use? What three objects would represent you in a statue?
Abby, you look dying.
I'm still
You're
missing
dying
one.
to.
I'm missing one.
Okay.
So
Go
if
ahead, Jay,
anyone-
then.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay. So first of all, I want to invoke the Jesus rule and just say, Bible is off the table. You
Thank
can't
you.
use the Bible.
Because I was really
because I would.
conflicted on that one. Yeah.
Because as I thought about the three objects, I'm like, listeners are going to be like, you didn't
I
even
don't
say a
think
Bible.
Fletcher
What kind
thought
of
of
a...
that.
I don't understand the question. I thought it's like, what materials would you make your statue
Okay,
out of?
here, my statue would include...
Chung Chungs. There's this
quite possibly.
corn dog place, and it's called Chung
It's not
Chungs.
the rice dogs. It's not.
Rice
That's
dogs,
the
you're right.
the catch. But they're
Delicious.
also ramen noodles and chicken nuggets and. sweet
Jay's made
potato.
of mostly Chung
Okay,
Chungs at this
maybe I
point.
have to change my answer to chun chuns, but it's not. It does not chun chuns. Stop. The three objects that would be in my statue would be a hockey stick,
Okay.
a coffee mug,
Okay.
and an acoustic guitar.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. There we
That
go.
is-
Those would be
Jay.
the three objects that
Yeah.
represent me.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, Abby.
Okay. I got my third one.
They don't fully represent me.
Yeah. Of course. It's three
My
objects.
family would be there in the Bible.
They're
and
not objects. So
They're not. Wait.
that helps.
Now we know what Jay thinks.
Good things. Wow.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna go. I have
Please move
three.
on.
I'm gonna go with my water bottle because I carry it everywhere.
This is true.
Object, okay.
I'm gonna go with books in general, books, and then my third one's gonna be my passport.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So your turn, Fletcher.
My turn. I originally said gold, frankincense, and myrrh, but Abby said I stink too much to be.
No, I said I don't think
frankincense and
anybody
myrrh.
likes the way you smell.
Yeah,
Except
that's
maybe
the same thing.
Riley.
Anyway, so I can't say those three. But again, I thought they were materials, not objects. So what is
We're kind
me?
of going like Picasso style.
Yeah,
here.
like-
It's
Like
little
what three
Andy
things
Warhol, like modern things,
make
whatever.
up
Yeah.
my person?
Like your baseball hat that you wear every day.
Yeah, but I don't like having to wear. It's just because I'm bald that I have to wear a hat now.
Fletcher's gonna be like steak.
Okay, yeah, we'll go with meat.
Meat.
Yeah, flesh. No, just meat.
Oh my gosh.
Let's see. Abby, keep going. Keep giving me ideas because I have nothing. What three things? Riley's here today. What do you think?
Meat's a good one.
Meat, food. Food in general
Food
is
in
probably
general.
something that.
Red cars.
Oh, you really like your pan.
Cars. Sure, I'll
You
go
like
with
cars
food,
too.
cars, and. But that's food. So Riley said a kitchen knife, but that's involving food. So
Yeah.
food, cars, and. Sure. Yeah, music. Yeah.
How do you? Music's not
a
an object. You
microphone.
need to pick something
Okay.
like an iPod or something.
I don't like iPods.
Okay. An iPod, an object.
This is terrible. This is
Your Olivia
I'm gonna
Rodrigo T-shirt.
Maybe
There we
that's a
go,
good
yeah.
one. I'm gonna go with Audible. The
Audible.
app.
Okay.
Because I read that every day because I don't read regular books.
All right, there we go.
Audible, food, and a red car.
with stickers on it.
That's
All
right.
right. Well, we'd love to hear your answers. What three objects that represent you would someone build a statue?
sure
out
hope
of?
they're
Or,
better
you know what
than
I was
mine.
thinking? Like, what if one of our listeners, like,
Built
built a statue for us, or like photoshopped, or so, I don't
That'd
know.
be great.
We'll see.
Just get a
I'm
picture
just
of
gonna-
us and like you're half hockey stick and half chun chuns and
I'm just putting
Abby's
that
a
out.
water
No,
bottle.
Chun Chun's wasn't
Oh,
on the
sorry.
list. I'm putting it out there. If anyone responds, then great.
I don't think we should be encouraging people to make statues of us because King Nebuchadnezzar got in trouble
well, yes,
for that.
you're right.
As you
Sorry.
make your statue, read the story. Listen to the Bible on Audible, and you'll hear the whole story.
Anyway,
And-
yeah, if you have an answer to that, email us at story@bfmc.org.
Or
And-
message our Instagram.
Yeah,
Yes.
or on Instagram. And then, as usual, we encourage you to read the story for yourselves. Today's story takes place in the book of Daniel.
Right. Which is not very close to the book of Exodus as far
Time-wise,
as
yeah.
time goes. We're actually, in the next minute or so, we're going to cover 700.
All right,
Some
I'm
odd-
timing you, okay?
Oh, no.
I don't
no,
think,
come
no,
on.
no, it's not going to be a minute. It's going to be more than a minute.
No, I want you to do it in a minute.
Nothing I do is
That's
less
why
than
I'm
a minute when I'm
challenging
talking.
you here. All right,
Come
you
on.
ready?
We can't have him skip over.
There's a
important
lot
Let's
to
give him
cover
some-
here.
Look at, look at how much stuff.
It's okay.
700 and
Come
some
on,
odd
just talk
years.
fast. Ready?
All right, so today we're jumping all the way to the Babylonian exile. So this going back, first of all, don't cut me off when I get to a minute. After the Exodus, the Israelites actually they received the law from God through Moses, and they found their way into the promised land by conquering the people, Joshua as their leader, and they were led by judges for about 400 years. And see, I have commentary to add, Abby.
Feel free. No, just feel free.
No, I want the
You have
minute.
30 seconds.
The last of the judges was a prophet, actually, named Samuel, and he actually anoints the first king of Israel, and that was Saul. And then there was David after Saul, and then David's son Solomon. And then after Solomon died, the kingdom was split into two by two kings, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And so Israel is in the north, which is made up of 10 of the 12 tribes, and Judah is in the south. And with Ephraim and Manasseh. And the kings,
There's
come
the
on.
timer. 1 minute. We're not done yet.
We're
like
not
halfway.
done. This is
Be
why
honest, we're still at 1000 BC.
that's right. Kings of Judah were actually descendants of David, while the kings of Israel were from a different line because they were not part of Solomon's
there
line.
was a
so
split,
yeah, the split, and so then we have the northern kingdom is actually conquered and destroyed around 740 by the Assyrian Empire. And the kingdom of Judah continued until Jeremiah came along and told of the destruction of Jerusalem and the exile of the people because they turned away from God. And also, as we've noted before, they never observed a Sabbath that they were supposed to observe, a full Sabbath year. And so that accumulated to equal out to 70 years of rest that the land would need. And so they were exiled because of that. And that actually happened in 587 BC when the Babylonians, led by our main character for today, King Nebuchadnezzar, captured and destroyed Jerusalem by taking its important citizens into captivity.
Crazy.
Wow.
That was a minute. Congratulations.
Yeah, I did it all in a minute.
All
Look
in
at
1
that.
minute.
Okay.
Abby's going to fast forward it.
Yeah.
And make
I'm gonna make you guys
make
shut.
it sound like you're going fast. So anyway, yeah, like we've said, today's story takes place in Babylon right after the destruction of Jerusalem in around 587 BC. And at this point, Babylonia, well, it is Babylon.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Babylon is kind of the superpower of Mesopotamia. It's what's in charge, previously having conquered the Assyrians in about 612 BC, and then later on they'll be conquered by the Persians, but that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Yeah, Babylon.
Yes. So we know that Babylon is modern day Iraq. And King Nebuchadnezzar's palace and his two most famous building projects, the Ishtar Gate and the remains of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, are actually located just 10 kilometers north of modern day Hilha in Iraq.
That's
So,
something I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much travel happens to Iraq these days, but
Yeah.
I'd love to see Babylon and the Hanging Gardens.
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
actually, the next thing I was going to say is in the 80s, Saddam Hussein actually tried to rebuild
Right.
Babylon.
Whoa.
And rebuild King Nebuchadnezzar's castle because he thought it was like the prime time of Iraq. And so I'll have an article in the show notes for anyone who wants to kind of look at that. But that palace is actually still in Iraq, and it's still, people can go through it and see it. But the actual one is not. There's some ruins around, but they've been destroyed from war over the years.
Yeah. All right, let's start today's story. It takes place, like we said, in the book of Daniel. He's one of the major prophets in the Old Testament. Daniel is an Israelite who was taken into captivity by the Babylonians. He was from the tribe of Judah, and he was a member of one of the kind of noble families. He was an important figure in Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar wants to train a few young Jewish men to enter royal service.
Yeah.
So he sends for some. And during the selection, 4 of the men selected were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And you'd probably know them as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then Daniel's Babylonian name was Belteshazzar.
Yeah.
So if we say either their Jewish name or their Babylonian name, that's what they are.
I would like it if from here on out you referred to Daniel
As exclusively Belteshazzar?
Yeah.
That's one I've actually said quite a lot, and I
Really?
can say it way
That's
better
the
than
one that
Nebuchadnezzar.
I would say much less than the other, which is interesting because the text generally Daniel is the name that continues for Daniel, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego
Is the
become
one.
the names that the others are referred to as.
So today's story involves those men, but our focus is going to be on King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
So he has actually 3 encounters with God, with God's work, and that are told in the book of Daniel. So we're going to tell this one in 3 separate stories. So here we go with story number
and each
1.
are going to be in 1 minute.
1 minute.
1 minute
or less.
stories, quick.
No
One of the-
way, not a
No,
chance.
not a chance. So this one time, the King Nebuchadnezzar has this disturbing dream. So he calls all his magicians and astrologers and sorcerers and wise men to come interpret the dream. They say, tell us the dream and we'll interpret it for you. But King Nebuchadnezzar's not having any of that. He says, tell me what the dream was and then interpret it and I'll believe you.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm going to kill you all.
Right.
This guy
Such an
gets
unreasonable
I know.
request.
First of all, it's hard enough to interpret dreams. Second of all, you have to know what the dream was.
Now, here's
You
the
get
thing.
nothing.
Abby, you just said unreasonable request. And you're right, although I think it's the right request.
Absolutely.
Because if you're going to come with an interpretation, what it means, and the dream came from God, then you better know it,
Exactly.
right? So I think it's highly unreasonable, but it is
If you're going to be interpreting
one
dreams,
way to know for sure.
Yeah,
if
that's
this
one of the
is true,
things that
because
it said.
You can just make it up.
Exactly. That's actually one of the things it said. The king's like, I'm going to do this. I know you guys are liars and you've lied to
Yeah.
me before. This is going to prove that it's true.
Yeah.
Because nobody can do this. Obviously, they say this is not possible. No man in the world can do this. Only a God can do it. And the king is furious and, says that all the wise men of Babylon are going to be killed. I'm going to put them to death. They can't do anything for me.
Which wouldn't fare well for the rest if they are actually wise.
Yeah.
It's not very good for the future of Babylon.
Maybe
but-
that's why they got destroyed if they're killing all the wise men. Anyway,
right.
so a man named Arioch, the captain of the guard, was sent out to kill the wise men. And while gathering all the men, they ran into Daniel and his other friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel, talks to him really tactfully and wisely and says, why has the king done such a harsh sentence? And he actually talks Arioch into giving him an audience with the king. And Daniel says, can you give me some time to go see if I can interpret the dream? So the king gives him a night. And Daniel goes back to his friends. And they fall on their knees and they start praying to God, show us mercy, deliver us from the king's thing and help me interpret the dream. So then Daniel wakes up that morning having had a vision of what the dream was and its interpretation, and Daniel and his friends celebrate and praise God for giving them the dream. So Daniel then goes to the king and he tells the dream exactly what it was and its meaning. Now we're not going to go through the whole dream and its interpretation because that's going to take a while. We got 3 stories to tell, but basically there was this statue with a head of gold and then body parts of different materials, and they represented different kingdoms of the age. And then this giant stone came and crushed the entire statue, and that represented God's kingdom coming.
Right.
Anyway, that's the dream that he had. And after hearing this, Nebuchadnezzar falls on his knees and starts worshiping Daniel and says, truly your God is the greatest of gods, the Lord over kings and revealer of the mysteries. because you have revealed the secret to me. And then he appointed Daniel to be ruler over the entire province of Babylon and gave him great gifts, and even appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as important people in the country as well.
Right. What's interesting is that Daniel says something to Pharaoh that is
king.
To the King Nebuchadnezzar. Sorry. Well, it was actually the reason I stumbled and said Pharaoh is because I was thinking of Joseph, who also interpreted dreams for the Pharaoh. But Daniel says that it's not for him to interpret. He actually can't interpret the dream, but there is a God in heaven that can reveal mysteries. And Joseph has a similar interaction with Pharaoh, who is looking for an interpretation of his dream. And Joseph says something similar to Pharaoh about interpreting dreams, which
he can't do it. That was that's something. Well, if we look at the characters of Daniel and Joseph, they're two people in the Bible that always give glory to God in what they're doing. They always acknowledge God as the one that is working through them. Yeah. And especially we see that when interpreting. Daniel doesn't take any of the credit. He says, God can do it, and he's done it through me. Yep. So that's Nebuchadnezzar's first experience with God, and it seems that he's accepted him. You know, this is the God of gods. This is God over kings. He is the one. Right. And now we're going to get into story 2. We see it doesn't last that long.
Yeah. So God of gods, God over all the kings. And then Nebuchadnezzar says, it'd be great if there was a 90-foot statue of me.
Made of gold.
Made of gold. Yeah. 90 feet of gold. And so he has the statue built, and then he sends for all the officials, the leaders, the judges, everyone to come to the dedication of the statue. And so a herald goes out and tells the crowd that anytime the instruments sound, no matter what is happening, everybody must bow down and worship the king's statue. And anyone who doesn't do that is going to be thrown into a furnace.
I'd hope to not be doing like a job that requires a lot of attention. Let's say something's important's going on. Oh, the instrument. Oh, crap, I got to drop everything I'm doing.
Right?
Imagine if you were carrying King Nebuchadnezzar at that point.
Yeah, you have like his, what is that called when you have...
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, the people carrying
on
chariot.
Sticks.
On sticks.
On sticks.
Yeah. Drop to their
really
knees, he falls on the ground. Yeah, no. I guess they're exempt from the...
Yeah. So somehow some of the astrologers noticed that the Jews were not bowing down to the statue. And so they go and tell King Nebuchadnezzar.
Wait, so how did they see that they weren't bowing down if their faces and their heads were supposed to be...
Yeah, it's kind of like the kid who's like, your eyes weren't closed during prayer.
Yeah. It's like, hey, how do you know? Yeah. It actually says, I like the translation, one of them that I read, and it was like, and they ratted out. Yeah. Ratted out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah. So the king, not pleased with that, he asks if it's true, and he gives them one more chance because remember he liked them.
Yeah,
and
he's appointed them before.
They passed a test earlier on. They wanted to, he wanted them to have all of the best food, and they refused to eat food that wasn't kosher, and so they said no. They actually have earned his favor over time. And so he wants to give them one more chance. Like, hey guys, they're saying this, and I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Let's hear it. And they say to the king that they're not afraid, and that their God will protect them. And I love this. Even if he doesn't, they'll never bow before him or his gods. Mm. And as you can imagine, didn't go over super well with the kind of person who would build a 90-foot statue out of gold of themselves. And so he says, heat the furnace 7 times as hot as it already was. I don't even know how you do that. Like, how do you...
Usually you keep your furnace pretty hot. I don't know if there's like a 7x setting on your furnace. But
right?
Maybe he's just, exaggerating. He's like, heat 7 times!
Yeah,
7 times as hot!
That's right.
They're going to burn!
Yeah.
Sorry if that was too loud and you cut it out.
I really wish I got a picture of you doing
You know
that.
what I mean? Cook it up! Eat it all the way!
Cook it up. That's
Burn
it.
them! Yeah.
And so it actually, whatever it is, it got so hot that the men who threw them into the furnace actually died.
Oh, boy.
Which is...
What a sucky way to die.
Right? You just finished bowing.
You
doing
did
what you were
everything
supposed
right.
to do. And he's okay, let's go
Like, that's
kill
so unfair.
the ones who are not listening, and you're following orders, and then you die.
Yeah.
And then the king noticed something really strange, and he asks the men, how many men were thrown into which I don't know, like, did you
forget?
lose count? It's not a big
he's
number.
Just really confused.
Hey, Ned,
Maybe he's in awe.
It's only 3, right? Maybe the heat was causing him to dehydrate and hallucinate a bit. But he says, how many men were thrown in there? And they say, well, there was only 3. And he says, well, then how come I see 4 men walking around in the fire, and the 4th looks like a god? Which is there's lots to say there. Maybe a different episode. So anyways, he calls them out, and he says Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out.
See, he acknowledges it already.
Yeah.
It hasn't even, he's realized it. And he's like, oh, wait, these guys, I remember what he did with my dream.
Right.
He's looking back, and he's like, oh, these guys serve the high God.
And he's had example after example, right? From the food incident to the dream to now this. And their words, which were, God can save us, and even if he doesn't, we'll never bow to you.
Yeah, so basically also King Nebuchadnezzar is actually asking God to perform another miracle by letting them come out alive.
Right.
So the first thing that Nebuchadnezzar does is assume that God is going to let them come out,
right.
which is also saying something about his faith.
And
there.
so they do. They come out, and there's not a mark on them, and they don't even smell like smoke. Like, I can't be within 15 feet of a campfire without my wife going, you stink, go take a shower. So, which other things make her say that too. But that's not the point of the story. So Nebuchadnezzar says, what does he say? He says, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him, and they defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. And so then he makes a decree, which may be questionable. He says, if anyone
he makes
speaks
a lot of decrees, we'll put it that way.
Like, it's like...
he's so enthusiastic.
He gets it, and then he doesn't quite get it. And then he gets it, and he doesn't quite get it.
It's a lot like Israel, though.
Yeah.
In the desert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And so the decree is that if anyone speaks a word against God, against the God of the Israelites, they will be killed. For there is no God who rescues like him. Which is, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right. And we have one more story.
Yes, number 3. This is the last time we hear about King Nebuchadnezzar. He has another dream. And this time it's a little bit different. It's about this tree. And it's in Daniel chapter 4, and we see it. And it's basically this story about Nebuchadnezzar having a dream, and he starts off the chapter, it's him writing, and it says, I want you all to know about the miraculous signs and wonders the Most High God has performed for me. And then he continues to tell the story, but essentially he has this dream about this great tree that is greater than all the trees, and it's huge and wonderful, and it covers over all the land, and there's fruit, and all the birds feed on it, and all the beasts are under its shade. And then an angel comes and says, let this tree be cut down and destroyed, but let the roots stay and be bound. And King Nebuchadnezzar's like, what the heck is this dream about? I know somebody who can interpret dreams. I'm going to go get my friend Daniel. So he gets Daniel once again and says, can your God interpret this dream? And he sends for him, and Daniel ends up interpreting the dream, and he says, this is about you. This is God telling you what's going to happen to you. And essentially what the interpretation is that for 7 years, God is going to take everything away from you. Nebuchadnezzar is this tree, and he's going to be cut down. And when he says that the stump and the roots are going to remain, it means that you'll get it back. And it says for 7 years, you're going to be cut down, and you're going to be like an animal. You're going to stay in the dew. Your hair is going to grow long. Your nails are going to grow long. You're going to lose your mind for 7 years. And Nebuchadnezzar is terrified by this, right? He doesn't know what's going to happen. He realizes that it's probably true. Daniel has done this before, but he is very scared that this is going to happen. So one day, Nebuchadnezzar's like, okay, I'm going to turn away from my ways. Daniel says, if you turn away from sin and if you follow God, you'll have a chance.
Right.
And it says then a year later, Nebuchadnezzar's walking around on his palace, and he goes, look at this beautiful kingdom that I have made. And then it says, as soon as those words left his mouth, he lost his mind and he became like an animal, like a wild animal. And for 7 years, he lived among the beasts and let his hair grow long and his nails grew wild. And then just like the prophecy, or just like the dream said, rather, for 7 years, he lived like that. And then all of a sudden he was awake again and the kingdom was returned to him. And once again, he acknowledged God's power and God's control over his own kingdom. And that was his last encounter. And then that's how it ends, with Nebuchadnezzar actually acknowledging God and following him.
Yeah.
So,
All right,
crazy.
So I guess that leads to our final question.
Yeah, sure.
So how does the story of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel and Meshach and Shadrach and Abednego,
Belteshazzar. I didn't do it. I didn't
You
do it. I
didn't.
kept saying Daniel.
Yeah, that's
oh, well.
right.
how does it lead to the story of God throughout the rest of the Bible?
Yeah. I'm thinking, what I've been thinking about is Nebuchadnezzar's reaction is a lot like, well, Abby, you said Israel, but just even our response to God. We can see him do stuff for us all sorts of times, many times, over and over again. We see what he's done for us and people that we know. And then we think, oh, okay, and then we forget about it.
Yeah.
And then we turn away, and then he shows us again, and then we turn away, and then he shows us again, and he turn away. Yeah. And all he wants is for us to follow him and us to listen to what he's saying. Yeah. And over again, we turn away.
Yeah, that's it. And we mentioned in the last episode, in the giving of the law, God says, you shall have no other gods before me. And that includes making yourself a god, as we saw with Pharaoh and in Nebuchadnezzar. And when we see it in ancient leaders, it's easy to identify. We're like, oh yeah, look at that. They're worshiping other gods, or they lifted themselves up as gods. But we need to pay attention to these stories for ourselves as well, because we run the risk of doing the same thing in our own lives.
And it might not look the same. That's you look at a king and say, okay, they're going to worship me. That is such a literal version of that, but we do it in a much subtler way.
Well, we do it with our accolades, with our achievements. Look at me, I've done this, and I've achieved this, and you should respect me for this, and whatever. And so we kind of demand worship, if you will, in those ways, and we believe our own lies in that as well. And this is actually something I personally wrestle with at times, where I'm working through not believing my own lies and believing that I'm better than I actually am. And so Nebuchadnezzar reminds us that we need to be continually looking to God and placing him on the throne and saying the things that he said in his high points, like praise be to the God of Israel.
The Most High.
The absolutely. Most High, right? And just like exalting God, giving him, but in more than just words, giving him the first place in our lives as well.
Yeah, like the following through. Like, it's all good and dandy to send out a decree, nobody's going to speak against this God. This is the Most High God. But he didn't follow through with it. And the following through is what God was wanting with Nebuchadnezzar, right? He showed him over and over again, I am powerful. And he accepted it, but follow through.
Don't just say it.
Yeah.
Live it.
Live it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. So I guess that concludes our episode for today. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening. Hope to see you next week.
Bye for now.
Bye.